नमश्रीयति राजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुतत् स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Akhil Sudhakar, this evening's MC, and on behalf of Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Carolina and Hindu YUVA at NC State, I extend a warm welcome to you all. Today we are gathered here for a talk on Vedanta. It's a school of Hindu philosophy introduced to the West by Swami Vivekananda himself. We'll hope you find today's program insightful and engaging. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share the agenda for the evening. We'll have an introduction and welcome address. Dr. Samrat Das will introduce and welcome our honorable speaker, Swami Sarvapriyananda Ji Maharaj. After which we will have an opportunity to listen to Swamiji's speech on today's topic, that is Vedanta in the 21st century. Post talk, we will have an interactive Q&A session in which you can ask your questions to Swamiji. After the Q&A session, we will have a note of thanks before we disperse. Without further ado, I invite Sri Samrat Das, Vice President of Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Carolina, Associate Professor of Pediatrics at Duke University School of Medicine, past President of American Federation of Medical Sciences, to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and pranam to Swami Sarvapriyananda Ji and all distinguished guests here. So, on behalf of Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Carolina, it is my pleasure to welcome you all today. I would like to thank the North Carolina State University and the Hindu YUVA organization, their branch at North Carolina State University, to host this event. There's a little bit of history behind how we came to North Carolina State University. Once everyone knew about Swami Sarvapriyananda's visit to North Carolina, all the universities were interested in hosting him. So, but when we saw the passion of the NC SU students, and especially the Hindu YUVA organization, and we said we're going to host the event at NCSU. So thank you for everything you've done. It is my honor to introduce Swamiji today, who, by the way, does not need much introduction. But before I formally introduce Swamiji to you all, I would like to say a few words about our organization, the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Carolina. We have a small but beautiful center near the Raleigh-Durham Airport, and where we have daily worship, regular classes, and special pujas. Please do visit us at the center. We are also involved in many service activities in addition to spiritual activities. Our website, vedantanc.org, has the most updated program schedules. Swami Sarvapriyananda Ji is a world-renowned monk of Ramakrishna order who has represented Hindu religion at many eminent places, including World Parliament of Religions and the United Nations. Swami Sarvapriyananda's depth of knowledge of Vedanta and his ability to make very complex subjects appear very simple is unparalleled in the current era. Swami Sarvapriyananda Ji is the current minister and spiritual leader of the Vedanta Society of New York since January 2017. He joined the Ramakrishna Mutt in 1994 and received sannyasa in 2004. He has served as an acharya of the Monastic Probationers Training Center at Belur Mutt, India. He has also served in various capacities in different educational institutions of the Ramakrishna Mission in India, and as the Assistant Minister of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. He was a inaugural fellow at the Harvard University Divinity School in 2019-2020. Swami Sarvapriyananda Ji is a world-renowned speaker on Vedanta, and his talks are popular with the internet audience. Very popular. He has been a speaker on various prestigious forums such as TEDx, SAND, and has given a Google talk. He has been invited to speak at universities across the world, including Harvard University. The Swamiji has engaged in dialogues with eminent thinkers like Deepak Chopra, Rupert Spira, and Rick Archer. Swami Sarvapriyananda has played a prominent role in organizing and participating in various interfaith panels and seminars, including speaking at the World Parliament of Religions in Toronto in 2018 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. His popular talks have been compiled into a collection of ebooks. Who Am I, What is Vedanta, and Dissolve into Infinity are the titles currently available on Amazon Kindle. So without further delay, I would now like to invite the Hindu YUVA students of NCSU to please invite Swami Sarvapriyananda ji on the podium and to felicitate him with a bouquet of flowers.
Let me start with a chant. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste and good afternoon, everybody. And I owe a lot of thanks to the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Carolina, of course, but also the North Carolina State University and the Hindu YUVA, who have worked together to make this event possible. And most of all, to all of you who have come to discuss this rather strange, abstract, ancient in Hindu philosophy in North Carolina in the 21st century, in the middle of a hot summer. So thank you very much. Just keep track of the time. So, Vedanta in the 21st century. Vedanta is easy to define, or at least point out. The word Vedanta itself means Veda Anta. Veda refers to the word itself refers to knowledge, but specifically to the texts, the most ancient foundational texts of Hinduism, which is itself the most ancient living religion in the world today. But Vedanta, the word Anta at the end, means the end. So Vedanta is the final teachings, the highest or the deepest spiritual philosophical thought which is found in the Vedas. Another way of looking at Vedanta would be the philosophy of Hinduism. So Hinduism is widely diverse. It's so vast and diverse. Sometimes here in the United States I'm invited to talk to school students and introduce Hinduism to them as part of their religion course. And I have to make an effort to tell them how diverse it is. I say sometimes, if you ask a question to a Hindu about Hinduism, any question, and the answer would be yes and no. Do Hindus believe in God? Yes, of course, and no. There are schools of Hindu philosophy which are, if not atheistic, at least they don't touch upon the subject of Ishvara or Bhagavan, like Sankhya philosophy, for example. Is God male? Yes and no. God in Hinduism is female and beyond gender, and anthropomorphic and beyond any human form altogether. Is God with form? Yes and no. God is with form, and how? In Hinduism, if you go to a Hindu temple, you will see a wide diversity of iconography depicting God in the various forms in which God is worshipped in Hinduism. And yet God is formless. This is also recognized by all Hindus, that God is ultimately formless. And one idea is that the Hindus worship a multiplicity of gods. Again, the answer would be yes and no. Yes, apparently. But if you investigate with any depth at all, you immediately come in any of the traditions of Hinduism, they will say that there is only one God, there is one ultimate reality, which is worshipped in different ways. So, the philosophy behind this wild diversity is Vedanta. If you come across any Hindu tradition, if you go to a temple and come across a tradition, you see clearly different deities, different forms, different traditions of Hinduism, different sects of Hinduism. But if you ask them, what's the philosophy behind it? What's the theology behind it? What's the thinking behind it? What are the texts behind it? It will be traced back to some form, some flavor of Vedanta. So there are multiple schools of Vedanta. For example, I am a monk, and the Vedanta societies which have invited me here, we subscribe to a particular strand of Vedanta called Advaita Vedanta, a non-dual Vedanta, which is my home tradition. So today when I will speak, I'll speak mostly about non-dual Vedanta. But that's not the only kind of Vedanta. Here in the United States, for example, a lot of people, they know Vedanta. There's a very visible group of Hinduism, you know, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, it's called. So that's another flavor of Vedanta. Many people don't know that. It's called the Achintya Bheda Veda school, the Gaudiya Vaishnava school, Bengal school of Vaishnavism, which has another school of Vedanta as its, let's put it this way, as its source code, let us say. In recent times, in the United States, in different parts of the United States, you have seen the growth of these magnificent temples by a particular sect from Gujarat in India, the Swami temples. Now, if you again investigate there, you will find that's another school of Vedanta. Until very recently, they were allied to the Vishishtadvaita school of Vedanta, qualified monastic school of Vedanta. But now they are developing their own interpretation of Vedanta, which shows Vedanta is still generating, still throwing off newer and newer interpretations. And in Hinduism, that's always a good thing. Swami Vivekananda, who is my predecessor, who is the one who brought Vedanta to these shores, he would say that you can have as many sects, as many interpretations of religion as there are human beings. More the merrier, better. Now, that is the background for Vedanta. So when we're talking of Vedanta, it's the philosophy of Hinduism. But that's not really the subject this afternoon. This afternoon, we're going to talk about Vedanta in a more contemporary, in a more contextual sense. The reason I put this topic was, I read somewhere, Ken Wilber, he mentions this phenomenon, you know, there's something called spiritual but not religious. It's not so much here in North Carolina, but more and more in a place like California, for example. Lots of people will say, yeah, I'm spiritual, but I don't belong to any religion. So Ken Wilber says, there are a lot of young people are getting turned off from organized religion. And if religions are to retain the interest of young people in the 21st century, they'll have to do three things. First, they have to stop fighting with each other. Absolutely, that's the first. Nothing turns off a genuine spiritual seeker more than interfaith fighting. So they have to stop fighting with each other. Second thing he says is that what they teach, what the religions of the world teach, has to be in accordance with, or at least should not be in direct conflict with, accepted mainstream science. So that which is already well established in science. You don't have to prescribe to scientism, but don't go against facts which are already known and well established. So that's the second thing he says. And the third thing he said was, religions of the world have to reconcile themselves to the rapid changes in sensitivities and values, especially in the younger generation, with regard to race and gender and sexual orientation and whatnot, and ecology. So you may not teach those things, but at least you should not, in the religions, you should not teach things which are just the opposite of the value systems which are prevalent in the world today. So three things. Don't fight with each other if you want young people to stay with you. Second, don't be openly unscientific. Don't say things which are completely wrong in the eyes of science and reason. Third, be in sync with modern values or postmodern values, for example. And when I read that, I thought, what about our home tradition? What about Vedanta in relation to these three things? And I do believe that Vedanta has something very valuable to contribute. Swami Vivekananda brought it in the late 19th century to the United States. And by the way, there's a very beautiful book, if you're interested in the growth and spread of Vedanta and Hinduism in the United States. Phil Goldberg has written the book, American Veda. And there he starts, even before Vivekananda came to the United States, he starts with the transcendentalists. He starts with Emerson and Thoreau, Walt Whitman, who were very immersed in Eastern thought, in Indian thought actually. And then Vivekananda, and then the growth of the Vedanta societies which came after Vivekananda. Vivekananda started the first one, the one I come from, the Vedanta Society of New York, was started by Swami Vivekananda in 1894. It was the first Hindu ashram in the West. And then he goes on to the coming of so many other teachers from the East, especially from India. Swamis and yogis, and Buddhist lamas and philosophy teachers from various Hindu traditions, from Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, and so on. So the relevance of Vedanta to the 21st century, that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to start with one area where it really attracts me, I would say the congruence or the meeting between Vedantic thought and modern inquiries. When you talk about Vedanta and science, it's a hot topic. A lot of people talk about Vedanta and quantum mechanics and whatnot, and physics, especially fundamental physics. I don't know. There could be a lot of meeting. People do say what you are saying in Vedanta, Swami, we have analogous thinking in quantum mechanics, for example. Maybe, because I can't say with authority. I do not know enough physics to make a statement about it. Though, before I go on, just 3 years ago, there's this very well-known physicist, Brian Greene. He is a cosmologist at Columbia University. He is well known in the United States because of this PBS documentaries he made, Elegant Universe. So he was launching his latest book, Until the End of Time. It's more a book, I found it more a book of philosophy than physics, but anyway, that's what happens. When you pursue physics to its most fundamental depths, it becomes philosophy. So he was launching the book, and then I actually asked him this question about Vedanta and modern science. And his answer was very interesting. And full disclosure, he said, my elder brother is actually a Hindu monk. So he said, I used to have these discussions with him. In that forum, he said that what is said in the Vedas and in other Hindu texts, it is not science as such, but it's very remarkable. It's like a poetic resonance. He says it's like the same truth expressed in poetry. So there's a lot of congruence there, a lot of resonance there. That much. But he says it would be wrong to call it, like science, and so what you have in modern science today, you have in the Vedas. A lot of people make these claims. That's too much. That's going too far. But anyway, that's physics. And I'm not going to go down that route today. I'm going to take a different route. We're going to talk about a different area of science, which I think is very important today. We live in an age where there is a great deal of interest in consciousness, in what we are or who we are, in the very nature of our conscious experience. We have always been interested in consciousness, but there is a new burst of interest recently. One reason might be because of the development of new imaging technologies, the fMRI scans and all, which give you a very close, almost real-time scan of the human brain, activity in the human brain. That's one reason for the renewed interest in consciousness. Another reason is, I'm sure, the growth of artificial intelligence and the internet and the connectivity and our information systems leading to questions of what is intelligence, and what is mind, and what is consciousness. Renewed interest. These are perennial interests in human thought, but this renewed interest now. And one of the key thinkers in this new interest in consciousness, in the new science of consciousness, has been David Chalmers. So David Chalmers is the person, if you Google him, you'll find he's the person who coined the term, the hard problem of consciousness. So he's also responsible by himself for some of this new heated discussion on consciousness. If you Google it now, you will find all the time there are new publications. Every other week there is a new publication. Mystery of Consciousness Explained. There are two kinds of publications you will see. Why consciousness cannot be explained. That's one kind of publication. Another kind of publication will be the Mystery of Consciousness Explained. And I always say you should add explained away within brackets. It is in this context, I think, Vedanta has something very important to contribute. And that's what I'll primarily focus on today. What I'll do is, I was actually asked to talk about something similar a couple of years back. And I thought, the modern science of consciousness studies, what it is right now, where it is stuck, what the problems are, what the questions are, and what could be possible answers from Vedanta. And the way I want to present it today is draw a kind of a roadmap. See, the thing is, what Vedanta says about consciousness and what is mainstream understanding about consciousness today, these are very different. I am not a fan of the approach which says, look, this is what you are discovering about consciousness. We had it 5,000 years ago. Well, that's uninteresting. Why is that uninteresting? Because if you have already discovered in modern science what Vedanta was saying 1,000 or 5,000 years ago, well, congratulations. Then, from a modern scientific perspective, we could say to the ancient Vedantists, thank you very much, but we won't be needing you anymore, because we already got it. We've discovered it in our own way. No. It is because Vedanta says some startling things about consciousness, some very radical things about consciousness. That's why Vedanta is interesting and useful, potentially very useful for the science of consciousness. About 3 years ago, I got this opportunity to study the philosophy of mind at Harvard University in their philosophy department. And it gave me a very nice introduction to the present state of art in the philosophy of mind, the issues and what's going on there. And I discovered, to my amazement, a little bit of disappointment, what's going on in Western, now it's modern world philosophy of mind now. The last person who said anything significant, really interesting, really important, was Descartes, more than 300 years ago. You know, René Descartes, the famous French philosopher, we know him, students would know Descartes from mathematics, Cartesian coordinates, but he was a very well-known philosopher, mathematician, scientist, and philosopher. He said that mind and body are distinct entities. His famous cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I exist. He started out by trying to doubt whatever could be doubted. If there's anything. So for example, I'm standing here and looking at all of you. Can I doubt that this is real? Well, turns out that I can. Descartes would say that, you know, like a Matrix movie. It could be that you're in a Matrix movie and it's all fed to your brains directly and it's an artificial environment which is generated. It's actually not here. Or it could just be a dream. You don't have to go into a virtual reality for that. It could just be a dream. You could be dreaming. You could be taking a nice nap in your dorm and dreaming that you are in the auditorium listening to the orange guy. So Descartes said, you could doubt anything. You could doubt anything. You can never be certain of anything. However, there's one thing you cannot doubt. And that is the fact that you are doubting. That there is a thought. Some thought is there, that cannot be doubted. Because if I doubt the thought, if I doubt, am I thinking or not, is this real or not, that's also a thought. Even to doubt the doubt is a thought. So, thinking is there. And so Descartes jumped from that to say that Since thinking is going on and I'm experiencing the thinking, so I exist. I know that I exist because I think. Cogito ergo sum. Recently in his book, Reality Plus, David Chalmers, he is the head of the Mind-Brain Consciousness Unit in New York University. He's the guy who formulated the term hard problem of consciousness. Recently in his new book, Reality Plus, David Chalmers says, he gives it a Vedantic twist. He says, I would like to reformulate Descartes' cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I exist. I would make it, I am conscious, therefore I exist. Not just think. Any kind of consciousness, even not thinking. Suppose you don't think for a moment, mind is blank, you are meditating. Blank. So not thinking, do you not exist? Of course you exist. You're aware of thinking and you're aware of not thinking, and therefore this awareness proves that I exist. So I found that Descartes said that. And he said, therefore, consciousness, that is thinking, mind, we cannot doubt that we have a mind, but we can doubt that we have a body. For example, you might be dreaming, you might be lying down in the bed and dreaming, maybe you're walking on campus at North Carolina State, but then you wake up and you discover you are sleeping in your bed all the time, which means when you experience yourself walking on the campus here in the university, that campus and the body which you saw walking in the campus, all that was generated by the mind in the dream. So even the body could be virtual. But notice, the mind cannot be virtual. The mind is experienced directly. So Descartes went on to say this famous conundrum in Western thought, mind-body duality. Mind is a different kind of reality, body is a different kind of reality. And that has persisted for 300 years. So back to the course, which introduced me to the philosophy of mind today. All the other papers in the textbook which we were supposed to read, and the textbook was actually edited by David Chalmers, all the other papers, they fall neatly into two categories. One category trying to reduce mind and consciousness into body, trying to show that, oh, mind and consciousness, it's nothing but brain activity, neuronal activity. Or another group of thinkers trying to reduce mind and consciousness into behavior. Another group of thinkers trying to reduce mind and consciousness is nothing but a language, a way of speaking. Those who are philosophy students, you know what I'm talking about. So this one philosopher called it nothing buttery. Nothing buttery. Nothing but. Consciousness is nothing but this. Another group of papers would show, hey guys, this is not working. You are unable to show that mind and consciousness are, brain or nervous system or language or biology. It's not working. The reduction is not working. It's not satisfactory. So basically this is where the philosophy of mind is stuck. Stuck for the last 300 years. Trying to show how consciousness and mind could be nothing but brain. That is the mainstream. That is physicalism, it's reductionism. It's activities of the brain, that's it. What's real? Body is real. The brain is a part of your body, and the brain is generating mind and thoughts and emotions and ideas and memories. Just like a candle is burning with a flame and it generates light and heat, just like that it's generating. Basically it's generating you. You are nothing but tiny processes going on, tiny bursts of electricity in the neurons in your brain. That's you. That's physicalism, a materialist reductionism. You say, so what's the problem? The problem is you cannot explain it. The problem is you cannot give a satisfactory account of mind and consciousness with, I'll come to that in a moment. So that's one kind of paper which is trying to reduce everything to body or language, and another kind of publication is trying to show this reductionism is not working. So this is where we are stuck. And what I want to say here in this subject is, this topic today is, Vedanta can contribute something to the study of consciousness today, something useful. Not just Vedanta, the entirety of Indian thought. Let me not, at the very beginning, let me make it very clear And I'm not saying that I have a one answer to all questions. I often say that Vedanta is a one answer to all questions, one solution to all problems. And I truly believe that in a certain sense. But from a scientific perspective, or even from a philosophy of mind perspective, let me just be more humble about it and say that there are a wide range of concepts from Indian thought, from Indian philosophy, which might be useful in solving some of the problems of consciousness studies today. In fact, in David Chalmers' recent book, Reality Plus, if you open the book, you will find Indians will immediately recognize this. Vishnu and Narada, cartoon. So this is a story of, Narada goes to Vishnu and says, show me what is Maya. And Vishnu says that you please go and get me a glass of water and a pot of water, and I'm thirsty. And Narada, you know the story, many of you know the story. He goes to a well where the girl is drawing water, and he falls in love with that girl, and then he proposes marriage to her, goes to her father's house, and they get married, and then they have children, and years pass by nicely. It's an old story. And then one day there's a big flood, and Narada desperately tries to save his possessions. They're all swept away. He tries to save his wife and children. They are swept away one by one by the flood waters. And then he's thrown helpless, weeping on the bank of the river. And he's, desperately wailing and moaning and crying. And then he sees feet of Vishnu, and he looks up. Vishnu is looking down at him. Narada, where is my water? I have been waiting for half an hour. And Narada looks and says this. All of it was virtual reality. So that's how actually David Chalmers, he starts his book on, the book is called Reality Plus, on virtual reality, the philosophy of, he calls it techno-philosophy. So with this story from Narada and Vishnu. Evan Thompson, who's a professor of philosophy at the University of British Columbia, he has this book, Waking, Dreaming, Being. Waking, Dreaming, Being. At the beginning of that book, it's about consciousness studies, and at the beginning of that book he says, the study of consciousness is not new. It's not a new subject which is now we have come to in late 20th century, early 21st century. No. It is 5,000 years ago. In India, the rishis of the Upanishads had the most profound things to say about consciousness studies. In fact, he goes on, in that book, he goes on to make a dramatic statement. Who? Evan Thompson. He says that the Upanishads are such remarkable documents in human history that we should date our history not with BC and AD, but with before Upanishad and after Upanishad. He says, that's so important. So that's what we're going to talk about. What are these remarkable discoveries about consciousness, and why is it so important? Why were they interested in consciousness studies? Not just Vedanta, not just Upanishads. Buddhists were interested. Jains were interested. The ancient schools of thought in India were interested in consciousness because the whole project was, how do we overcome suffering in human life? How do we attain fulfillment? Dukkha, suffering. That was the project of the Buddha. How did the Prince Siddhartha become Bhagavan Buddha? He was looking for a solution to suffering. Not his suffering, mind you. He was not suffering. He was having a great time. He was a prince. He was having a fun time. But he saw the pervasive nature of suffering. You know the story of he sees an old man and a diseased man and a dead body. And so he is acquainted with old age, disease and death. And he says, will it come to everybody? And his charioteer who's driving the chariot says, yes, prince. To my father, yes. To my wife and my child, yes. To me, yes. Everybody becomes old and diseased, and death will strike everybody. And then he sees a monk walking across, and he says, who's this person? He's looking for a solution to the problem of life. So then Buddha becomes, the prince goes off in search of a solution. But basically the thrust was, the project was, there is suffering in life. Is there a deep solution to the problem of suffering in life? The Upanishads took a positive approach. They called it Ananda. Ananda, bliss. is there deep, lasting, permanent satisfaction, fulfillment in life? So this was the project, you can call it the Moksha project or the Nirvana project. This is what the ancient Indians, all of them, all the thinkers who today we will club under Hindu thinkers, the Hindu sages, the Buddhists, the Jains, they were all, and there were other sects also at that time, they were all trying to find solutions to this. Now when you're looking for solution to human suffering, suffering of the self, and the fulfillment of the self, then you have to first understand, what am I? My suffering, my fulfillment, but what am I? Am I a body? Am I a mind? Am I a body-mind, or something more than that? So the interest came to consciousness. That's why all of these schools, they had their own theories of consciousness, some of which are very relevant today, I think. And today as we go along, we'll see. So what I will do now is, I've made this roadmap, modern understanding or the mainstream idea, I would say not understanding, lack of understanding of consciousness, we'll start there. And what is the Vedantic, the Advaita Vedanta conception of consciousness. And there will be 5 stops along the way, 5 steps from our present day kind of thinking about consciousness to what Advaita Vedanta wants to say. And in these 5 steps, we will also understand what Advaita Vedanta is. That's the beauty of this approach. So instead of trying to talk about what is Vedanta, what is modern science of consciousness, how they are related in the 21st century, it's boring. We'll just take a journey, step by step, journey of 5 steps. Step 1, pretty obvious. Consciousness is important. In fact, consciousness is the most important thing that we have in our lives. And this is not so difficult to understand. Christoph Koch, who is a leading scientist, brain scientist, he was the chief scientist for the Paul Allen Brain Institute. In his latest book, which he launched a couple of years ago, it's called The Feeling of Life Itself. It's about consciousness, but he calls it the feeling of life itself. And he says, consciousness is the most important thing that exists in the universe, for me. And he gives an example. In his book launch talk, he gave this example. He says, suppose, this is Christoph Koch, he says that suppose somebody were to give me $1 billion and tell me, you can be a billionaire, but we are permanently going to take away your consciousness. You won't be conscious. You'll be in deep coma. Would I agree? No. If you say, can I take away one of your fingers and give you $1 billion? I might agree. Can I take away one of your kidneys and give you $1 billion? I might agree. Can I take away your heart and give you an artificial heart and give you $1 billion? I might agree to that also. But if I take away your consciousness, you'd be alive. The doctors would testify, you'd be in a coma in Mount Sinai, you'd be alive. But you have no feeling at all, anything. Will you agree? And Christoph Koch says, no, I would not agree. We will not give up our consciousness, we will not trade away our consciousness for anything in the world. Everything can be given up for the sake of consciousness. Consciousness cannot be given up for the sake of anything else. And he calls it the feeling of life itself. Think about it. Everything that we are, that we do, and that we value, that we like, that we hate, that we enjoy, that we suffer, all of it depends on you being conscious. If you're not aware, if you're not conscious, then there is no life also. We think life is very important. But life is also important only if you're conscious. Even the life of a comatose patient, to the patient, I'm not saying to the people who are beloved, but to the patient, it is of potential importance only because the patient might wake up someday. But if the patient has no experience of life anymore, then even life is not of interest. Consciousness is the most important thing that we have. All our science is done in consciousness. All our art and religion and politics, all our enjoyment and suffering, everything is in consciousness, is dependent on consciousness. So consciousness is the most important thing in our lives. Now, if you say this, a modern youngster would probably say that, the American expression, what is it, like, duh. Yeah, it's so obvious. Go on. Yes, it's obvious, but it needs to be said. Why it needs to be said is this. In NYU, they have a very good department of philosophy there, especially philosophy of mind. The leading philosopher of mind today in the world, one of them at least, would be Ned Block, who's in NYU. So after one of these conferences, in fact, the conference was on Advaita Vedanta perspective of the hard problem of consciousness. So after one of these conferences, he just rhetorically remarked, why is the problem of consciousness so important? Why is it so important? Meaning thereby, there are so many scientific problems. So suppose a particular hormone or biochemical is being produced, some kind of biochemical is being produced by our liver, for example, and we don't know what it is. And then one day some graduate student or some researcher will get a grant and they will find out what it is and publish it. So the problem is solved. Like that, brain is somehow producing consciousness. We really don't know how it is happening. One day someone will know. Why is it so important? Why do you have conferences, books, and seminars, and for and against, debates, hot debate? Why for thousands of years human beings are worried about what is consciousness? Why? That's the question he asked. He asked it rhetorically, I hope. Because the answer is, there is nothing close to consciousness. It is the most important thing in our lives because it's what makes our life itself possible. Just imagine what we are having an experience here. So it depends on seeing. Yes, but if you close your eyes, you are still experiencing it. It depends on hearing. Well, yes, if you close your ears, you can still experience seeing this, and somebody with sign language can show you what's going on. But if you're not conscious, if you fall asleep, which is a big possibility when you're having a Vedanta talk, if you fall asleep, then you're not experiencing. So consciousness depends on, everything depends on consciousness. That's step one. Consciousness is central. It's most important. All right. Second, step two. Step one, I think modern thought, philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, they all agree here. Consciousness is the most important thing in our lives. Second, consciousness is not brain. Consciousness is not brain. This is a big, big step forward. This is where the debate, right now the debate is centered there. Consciousness is not our brain. Now this is the so-called hard problem of consciousness. What is the hard problem of consciousness? When we talk about consciousness, what do we mean? What are conscious experiences? The experience of seeing, for example, is seeing shapes and colors. You're hearing sounds, speech and music. These are conscious experiences. We are hearing, we have thoughts, emotions, we have memories, we have desires. I like something, I dislike something else. We have will and intention. All of these we are experiencing all the time. And corresponding to that, there is brain activity going on. So today, there are brain scientists who can show you when you have a particular experience, you sip a cup of coffee and you taste the temperature, the heat of the coffee, the taste of the coffee, the aroma of the coffee, and there are distinct activities in your brains, in your brain cells, parts of your brain going on which you can actually detect on fMRI scans. Now the idea is that the brain is producing these conscious experiences. Here is the problem. The problem is how? To appreciate this problem, think about it. Every physical object in the universe has only one state. This bottle of water has only one state. It's a bottle of water. There is no internal feeling going on in this bottle of water. This table has only one state. This is a table. Whatever you investigate and find out about the table, that's it. But there is no internal subjective feeling going on in that table. Now you are claiming, we are claiming, scientists are claiming, the brain is a unique physical entity. The brain apparently, objectively is one kind of thing, living matter, organic matter, brain cells, and there's some lot going on there, complex matter, spongy stuff, living flesh. And second, it has an internal state of thoughts, emotions, ideas, and such an important internal state which is all our life. The internal state of that brain which is there in your skull is you. That is the claim. Isn't it a big claim? It's a huge, huge claim. In order to justify that claim, you have to show how little bursts of electricity are taste of coffee, color of the red flower, color of the blue sky, the heat, the coolness of the air conditioning and the heat of the sun outside. All these experiences, how are they coming from the tiny bursts of electricity? How? You are experiencing thoughts, emotions, ideas, perceptions. In your brain, if somebody investigates from outside, there are no thoughts, emotions, ideas, perceptions. There are bursts of electricity. What you can do is, by asking you and tracking that, scientists can establish a strong correlation. But correlation is not causation. Something strongly correlated means there is a link, but it does not mean that one is producing the other. All of you came through those doors. All of you came through those doors. And if the doors are shut, you can't come through. Now, is that, this is a one-to-one correspondence between your presence here and that door. High correlation. But does that mean the door has produced you? I say, oh, almighty door, the source of all beings. You have produced all these beings and you will soon absorb all of them. No. There is, in fact, there's Professor Gallenstrassen, who was a philosopher at the University of Texas in Austin. He wrote a half-humorous piece in New York Times. He called it the hard problem of matter. Not hard problem of consciousness, hard problem of matter. And there he said, there is no hard problem of consciousness. You know what has happened? We all experience consciousness. The moment you wake up, you feel you're conscious. And then, first you're conscious, and then you're conscious of something else. We are all conscious. First we are conscious, and then we are conscious of matter, of the world. Then we have somehow convinced ourselves that the matter, the world, the brain specifically, is producing consciousness. Then we can't understand how the brain is producing consciousness, and then we call it hard problem of consciousness. But implicit in this hard problem of consciousness is we have already made up our minds. See how silly it would be to say, we have already made up our brains. So we have made up our minds that brain is producing mind, brain is producing consciousness, and then we can't explain how, and then we call it hard problem. Rather, Gallenstrassen says in that article in New York Times, he says, rather, how is, the real problem is matter itself, because matter is appearing to you in consciousness. What is matter is the real question. And if you investigate matter as physics is doing, he says, you see matter is disappearing before our very eyes. From atomic theory of matter to subatomic and then subnuclear to quarks to superstrings and so on. Even now it's an open question. So he says he calls it hard problem of matter, not hard problem of consciousness. Consciousness is most obvious. So here is this second step. Consciousness cannot be reduced to the brain. Now what scientists will say to this, and I know many of you will be scientists, doctors, they'll say to this is something called promissory materialism. Yes, we cannot explain how conscious experiences are produced by electrical activity in the brains, we cannot. But give us time, 30, 40 years, we'll be able to explain it. So this is called promissory materialism. I will give you an answer, but 40, 50 years later, 100 years later. And this is a serious answer. Massimo, who is a philosopher, a biologist and a philosopher at City University in New York. So he said to me once that we are having this discussion on consciousness in a philosophy circle. And then he said, look, people used to think that life is a mystery. 100 years ago, say only God can explain life. But now as biologists, I can tell you, we understand life down to the molecular level, which is a good explanation of life. Similarly, it is true, really we don't understand consciousness yet. But give us time, 30, 40, 50 years, and we'll understand consciousness, and we'll be able to explain it. What's wrong with that? There is something deeply wrong with it. I tried to explain, I don't know if I conveyed my point. I'll try to tell you what is deeply wrong with it. It's what's called in philosophy a category mistake, a category error. What is explanation? When you explain complex processes in terms of more simple processes. Life is a complex objective process, something that you see. You can see life in front of you. You can examine it. And you are able to explain complex objective process in terms of more fundamental objective processes. What is going on in a body absolutely at the cellular level or even at the molecular level, you can explain. So you have explained complex objective process, high-end objective processes in terms of more fundamental objective processes. Both are objective. You can study them. But now you are taking a jump. You are saying, I can explain consciousness, thought, feeling, emotion, which you know, everybody knows, these are subjective processes. I will explain them in terms of fundamental objective processes going on in the brain. I will explain subject in terms of object. This in philosophy is called a category error. You are making a huge, huge mistake. By doing that, what you are doing is, you are completely negating the subject as a category. You are saying the subject is another name for another kind of object. So I don't think it sunk in my objection there. But we'll see how this is a very serious objection. So this much we'll do at the second step, that consciousness cannot be readily reduced to the brain. So far, we cannot understand it. And not only is it cannot be reduced to the brain, to brain activities, in principle there is a defect, there is a problem. That in principle problem is called a hard problem of consciousness. That you cannot reduce subjective experiences to objective processes in the brain. How? Every solution, every answer, every explanation to consciousness, and there are some theories now, you will notice one thing common to all of them. One thing common to all candidates for explaining consciousness. At one point, they will make a jump from object to subject. At one point. And a very nice cartoon showed this. In that cartoon, a PhD student and a guide is there, and the PhD student is writing his theorems on the blackboard, mathematics. Step 1, lot of mathematics. Step 2, lot of mathematics. Step 3 is written, a miracle. Then step 4, lot of mathematics. So, and then the guide is telling the student in that cartoon, I think you have to work on step 3. Most of the explanations of consciousness today, including, I think, Tonini has got that integrated information theory, which is a leading contender. All of them have this problem, that step 3 problem. Somehow, after a lot of explanation, either about neurons, about information, or complexity, lot of things you'll say, and then make a jump into thought, emotion, idea. So, difficult to reduce consciousness is in principle hard problem of consciousness. What does it say? Consciousness is not brain. That's step 2. That there is a relation between consciousness and brain, that everybody admits. You cannot deny it. Step 3, we go further. You see, we are going further and further away from the mainstream understanding of consciousness, but we are getting a better understanding of Advaita Vedanta. Step 3. Step 3 is, somebody would be thinking, what are the first step and 1? Step 1 and 2 again? Step 1, consciousness is most important, central in our lives. Step 2, consciousness is not the brain. Step 3, consciousness is not mind. Here we leave just about all of modern philosophy of mind behind. If you ask modern philosopher of mind, if you ask a consciousness studies person, what is it that you're studying in consciousness? They will say perceptions, ideas, thoughts, emotions, all of this. But Vedanta will say all of those are mind. Consciousness and mind are not the same thing. How will you distinguish? Very easy. Very easy to distinguish consciousness and mind. You can do it right now. The insight is so powerful, you can do it right now. Whatever is experienced, here's the criterion. Whatever is experienced as this, whatever you can label as this, is not consciousness. It is an appearance to consciousness. Right now, in our experience, this table, this is not consciousness, it is this. This hand, not consciousness, this. I blink my eyes. This blink of the eyes, not consciousness, because this blink of the eyes. I am thinking, Even these words, I am thinking, this is not normally what a consciousness studies expert would classify as subject matter of consciousness, thought. No, according to our analytic approach, if I can say this thought, I am thinking, this thought, then that thought is also not consciousness. This memory, not consciousness. This emotion, this feeling, which everybody in all consciousness studies textbooks would say, yeah, that's part of our study. Feelings, emotions, ideas. This feeling, it is something that you experienced. That's not consciousness. The one which is experiencing this table, that is consciousness. The one which is experiencing this hand, that is consciousness. The one which is experiencing the blink of the eyes, that is consciousness. The one which is experiencing this thought in the mind, that is consciousness. So everything objective is not consciousness. Everything that appears to you, that which is experienced, is not consciousness. Mind is experienced. All our thoughts, look inside. Our thoughts, feelings, ideas, emotions, they are all experienced. That's why an Advaitin, if face to face with Descartes, would say, not I think, therefore I exist. I exist, therefore I think. Or rather, I am conscious, therefore I think. Even when I do not think, I'm still conscious. I still exist. I asked the professor in the class there, I don't think she was amused. I asked her, whenever Descartes falls asleep and loses consciousness, does not think, does he disappear? Does Descartes come into existence every day in the morning? This is actually based on a very funny cartoon where Descartes is sitting at a Parisian cafe, and this waitress comes to him and says, Monsieur Descartes, another cup? And Descartes says, I think not. And he disappears. So, no, thinking is the mind. Whether the mind is thinking or not thinking, you are conscious. And not even you are conscious, you are consciousness. That's what Advaita wants to say. Actually, not just Advaita, even Sankhya wants to say that. Yoga philosophy wants to say that. And schools of, at least 2 schools of Buddhist philosophy, they want to say the same thing. You are consciousness. And objects come and go before you. Thoughts are also objects. They come and go before you. It's like light. Light is illumining all these people in the room. If all the people in the room go out, will the light go out? No. I mean, you can switch off the light, but that I am saying light is quite separate from the illumined object. The illuminer is separate from the illumined object. Okay. So consciousness is not the mind. Big step forward. I'm not going to go into the depth of this. I can just suffice to say that those who are philosophy students, especially if you're taking philosophy of mind, I got the feeling, a distinct feeling, a number of the questions, not all, but a number of the questions in the modern philosophy of mind would be helped by this distinction between consciousness and thought. They keep mixing up consciousness and thought, and then they get into all sorts of tangles. Okay. So, mind is not consciousness. Consciousness illumines the activities of the mind, and we call it I experience thinking, perceiving, feeling, memory. Even the personality that I am is experienced by consciousness. That's why, in the famous hymn by Shankaracharya, many of us we have chanted it or heard it, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham Nirvana Shatakam. The first line of that, now you can understand it very easily. The first line of that, Mano Buddhyahankara Chittani Naham. Shankara sings 1400 years ago. This deep insight into consciousness studies which would be useful today. The first line itself says, I am not thought, Mana. I am not intelligence. Understanding, the capacity to understand. I am not memory. And he goes on to say, I am not I, ego. Ahankara na aham. Mano buddhi chitta ahankara na aham. Now it sounds very paradoxical. How can I be not I? But it's something that we all experience right now. If you think of I, the feeling of I, you're experiencing it. It's an objective thing. Even the ego is a function of the mind. It's an object, a subtle object. It's not an object like this. but it's an object, a thought in the mind. Even the ego is a thought in the mind. You are not the ego. And far less memories and thoughts and understanding, all of those are functions of the mind, and Shankara says, I am consciousness, not the mind. Therefore only Chidananda Rupa Shivoham. I am of the nature of consciousness and bliss. So that is the third step. Consciousness is not mind, according to Advaita Vedanta. We push further. Now we are really pretty far from the present state of thinking about consciousness, understanding of consciousness. Fourth step. So since I've told you 5 steps, you know that this is going to end pretty soon. So you can be patient a little more. You know it's coming to an end. Fourth step. Consciousness is one. This is radical. This is where Advaita actually breaks camp with Sankhya, the ancient philosophy of Sankhya. By the way, in David Chalmers' latest book, Reality Plus, first thing I did was, how many times has he referred to Indian philosophy? And I was very happy to see he has referred to Advaita Vedanta, referred to Sankhya. And I saw he has cartoons of Vishnu and Narada. And so a lot, he has drawn quite a bit from ancient Indian thought and brought it into the realm of modern consciousness studies. Question is, all right, consciousness is not the body, very clear. That is, consciousness is not brain, second step. Consciousness is not the mind, third step. So not the body, not the mind. There are many, many bodies and minds here. How many consciousnesses are here? That would be a question. So it seems one answer would be as many people as so many consciousnesses, as many bodies. In each body there is a separate mind, correct? And in each mind there will be a separate consciousness. Who says this? Sankhya says this. They divide the universe into 2, consciousness and matter, Purusha and Prakriti. Just by the way, very quickly, look at the broad range of understanding of consciousness and matter in ancient Indian thought. There are 4 ways of understanding, broadly, very broadly. Quick picture. One is, so the question is, what is the relationship between matter and consciousness? One is that matter produces consciousness, like modern scientists would say. Like what mainstream thinkers would say. Brain produces consciousness, matter produces consciousness. Who said this? In ancient India, the materialists, the Charvakas. They say, what is consciousness? And they give a very typically Indian example. Pan. Chewing pan. Only Indians will understand this. When you chew pan, on this surface of it, there is nothing red about the pan. It's green. And the ingredients also generally are not red. But you chew it, and your tongue will become red. Similarly, the Charvaka says, there are processes going on within us physically which are not conscious, but they produce consciousness. Like a pan chewing produces, not red pan, chewing it produces red color. Anyway, first theory, matter produces consciousness. Second theory, consciousness produces matter. Who says this? Not Advaita Vedanta. It is every theistic religion in the world. Every religion that believes in God. And what is the common belief for all God-oriented religions? Someone might say, but aren't all religions about God? No. Again, in India we know that, you know. There are religions that have nothing to do with God. And they are fully formed as religions. Buddhism, for example. That's why in the West, people find it confusing. There are talks, discussions. Is Buddhism a religion? That's only because the idea in the West is that religion has to be about God. Need not be about God. So there is all the God-oriented religions, they think that God is that which created the universe. Very good. God is the creator of the universe. Is your God conscious or unconscious? Of course conscious. So consciousness is created, time, space, matter, energy. That is the dualistic, theistic, religious idea of consciousness. Third, neither has created the other. Both are existing in parallel and interacting. Who says this? The oldest philosopher and the newest philosopher. The oldest philosopher is Kapila, the founder of the Sankhya philosophy, 5,000 plus years ago in India. He said ultimately there are 2 realities in this universe, consciousness, Purusha, and material nature, Prakriti, and they are interacting. Where are they interacting? You, I. We are the interaction of consciousness and matter. All sentient beings. And the newest philosopher today in the 21st century is saying this. I mentioned David Thomas, so he is now propounding or reviving an old theory called panpsychism, that consciousness is a fundamental reality in this universe and it is interacting with all other physical realities. He has a TED talk that we have to, since we cannot reduce consciousness to matter, we have to maybe think of some crazy new ideas. They're neither crazy nor new. They're 5,000 plus years old and pretty respectable in India. So it's Sankhya philosophy. Consciousness interacts with matter and they exist eternally. No one produces the other. The fourth theory is Advaita Vedanta. There are other theories also. There's a Kashmiri Shaiva approach. There are at least 4 different Buddhist approaches to consciousness. There's a whole Jaina approach to consciousness. Many, many theories. But Advaita Vedanta says, no, matter does not produce consciousness. Consciousness does not produce matter. They are not fundamental realities interacting with each other. Rather, matter is an appearance in consciousness. Matter is consciousness itself appearing to itself as its own object is matter. That sounds weird. No, it is not. It's exactly how you are experiencing the world right now. Right now, what is our experience of the world? I am aware and I'm experiencing objects in awareness. And Advaita Vedanta says, exactly. This is the most direct theory of consciousness. Consciousness is its own object also. So, but consciousness is one. The Sankhyan will say, why is consciousness one? Advaita Vedanta reverses that question, asks the Sankhyan, why do you think consciousnesses are many? Why do you think bodies are many? You can count, there are so many bodies. Why do you think minds are many? See, the opinion poll will so everybody has a different opinion. In India, they used to say, the person is not a sage unless he has a different philosophy of his own. Nasa muni yasya matam na vrinnam. Is not a muni, mananat muni, the one who thinks. Unless you have a theory of your own, you are not a sage. So they would do very well in modern academia, publishing their own papers. But their attitude was so different from modern academia. Their attitude then was that you publish, but you don't put your name to it. You're not looking for citations. You're not looking for getting credit. If somebody plagiarizes from you, you're most happy. You put everything in your guide's name, professor's name. Professor will be very happy. So everything is written by the master. No desire to take personal credit at all. And that makes it difficult for modern scholars to, who wrote this particular book. So they would everything is written by Vyasa. Everything is written by Shankaracharya. So I am nowhere on the scene. So consciousness is one. Why? Bodies are many, minds are many. But why do you say consciousness is many? Well, the Sankhyanis have some arguments. Quickly, 1 or 2 arguments, you will see those arguments don't stand. One argument the Sankhyan will give, well, consciousness is many because if we are all one consciousness, then the birth of one would be the birth of all, that if one person dies, then everybody would die. Everybody would die. But that obviously doesn't work because birth and death are of the body, not of consciousness, according to our theory. So one baby could be born, another person could die, consciousness continues to be existing. In both cases, consciousness is still there, just the body has died. Consciousness is not born with the birth of the body, does not die with the death of the body. Okay. Second objection from the Sankhyan would be, no, that's so weird. If we are all one consciousness, if one person falls asleep, everybody would fall asleep. One person loses consciousness, everybody would lose consciousness, which would be very terrible in a Vedanta talk like this. Somebody is sleeping always, and everybody falls asleep. Again, we'll say, no, that argument does not hold water, because waking and dreaming and sleeping are activities of mind. So Vedanta is very clear there. Waking is something that the mind does, and mind is not consciousness. We have already decided that. One mind may be awake and alert, another mind may be drowsy, a third mind may be sleeping, fourth mind may be dreaming, and a fifth mind may just wake up just now. Consciousness is one and constant in all of them. Well then, Sankhyans would say, we can't be one consciousness, because if then one person becomes enlightened, everybody else would become enlightened. So that would be great, but it doesn't happen. If one person, your professor has got all the knowledge, you just go to the class, you will also get all the knowledge, because you are all one consciousness. That would have been so nice. It doesn't work. And Vedanta says, the answer is very simple. knowledge and ignorance, even spiritual knowledge and spiritual ignorance, and worldly knowledge and ignorance, they are all in the mind. Consciousness reveals the ignorance of this mind, and when knowledge comes into this mind, consciousness reveals knowledge of this mind. Enlightenment is in the mind. Ignorance is in the mind, enlightenment is in the mind, just as what's happening on campus. So when you go to a class, I go to the class ignorant of the subject, and I come out hopefully knowing more about the subject with less ignorance about it. That happened in the mind. I was aware. Consciousness was aware of the ignorance in the mind. Now consciousness is aware of a little less ignorance, a little more knowledge. Consciousness is not affected by ignorance and enlightenment. So in this way, Advaita negatively tries to show that consciousness is one. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. This is, O Arjuna, 13th chapter. Very important words for consciousness studies. O Arjuna, in all, consider these bodies to be fields. And you, the consciousness in that body, know yourself to be the knower of the field. Kshetragyam. And how many fields are there? So many. How many knowers of the field? The intuitive answer would be, as many fields, so many knowers. And Krishna says dramatically in the next verse, he says, in all these fields, O Arjuna, know that there is only one knower of the field, one consciousness, and I am that. So that is the Vedantic idea of God also, the one consciousness in all sentient beings. And I am the one consciousness there. I won't pursue this more, but Vedanta holds that Advaita Vedanta holds that there is one consciousness. Consciousness is one unit, one identity in all bodies and minds. And then finally, the last step, most radical. Consciousness is all that there is. Everything is consciousness, even more deeply, everything is not. Consciousness only is. This is the whole Vedanta Advaitic idea of Jagat Mithya, the appearance of the world. The universe is an appearance in consciousness. It is consciousness alone which is appearing as its own object. The universe is not even produced from consciousness. Just as if you see a movie on the screen, cars and houses and trees and rivers, it's not that the screen is producing cars and houses and they are appearing on the screen. The screen continues to be the screen. They are light and pictures on the screen. Similarly, consciousness continues to be consciousness. No change there. And there is the remarkable power of consciousness that a universe of objects appears in consciousness. Very interestingly, there is a new theory in physics. I have no idea about what it actually implies. They call it from bit. Atoms, electrons, and the nucleus, and protons, and neutrons, and then they are composed of subnuclear particles, quarks, and they are composed of these esoteric superstrings. But you go further down, there is this theory, new theory now, that also is composed, the universe comes from information. Bit, B-I-T, computer bits. It means matter, it. It has come from bit. And in a recent conversation with David Chalmers, I said, this gives me an idea. I should give a talk about, in Sanskrit, consciousness is called Chit, C-H-I-T. So I should give a talk about it from bit from Chit. And David Chalmers says, I love it. This is a great idea, that the whole thing has actually come from consciousness. Objective universe is grounded in information. Information is grounded in consciousness. Consciousness is that which is appearing as this world of information and an objective world. That sounds crazy. I do not know the physics behind it, but it's interesting that people are actually thinking of such ideas. Elon Musk, of all people, I know that his name carries a lot of weight for a lot of people, so he subscribes to this theory that it's not only possible that we are living in a simulation, but it's most likely. And not using Vedanta, he's using statistics. Probability theory suggests that there will be vast number of planets which are capable of supporting life. So that will be the vast number of living civilizations which are very well developed. And if they are very well developed, they have tremendous computational capacity. The tremendous computational capacity means they can run extraordinary simulations. And the sheer numbers mean that we are probably living in a simulation, not in a real universe. We are a part of some alien teenager's video game. So our entire existence depends upon the teenager's mom saying, enough playing, come and have lunch. And so he switches off the game, gone, our universe is gone. But anyway, that's a theory. But and Elon Musk actually said that I think that's right. We are living in a simulation. So I'll leave you at that. We started with body and mind, and we have come to it from bit, from chit. 5 steps. Consciousness is most important, step 1. Consciousness is not the brain, step 2. Step 3, consciousness is not the mind. Step 4, one consciousness. And step 5, everything appears in that one consciousness. So there is no second reality apart from that one consciousness. No second, non-dual, Advaita. This is the Advaita paradigm of consciousness. You can see it's very distant from our modern conception, and yet not so distant also. And it's pretty logical. Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you. We have arranged for Q&A. Where are the volunteers with the microphones? You can just raise your hand so the people can... if you raise your hand, they'll come to you. Is that the plan?
Yes.
Yeah, so there are people on both sides.
Swamiji, if you can repeat the question.
I'll repeat the question for the recording. Yes, the gentleman there. Tell us your name and then ask the question.
Hello, I'm Chirodeep. I'm from Bangladesh, and it's a privilege to be here and listen to you. And it is not the way you ended that it can be a possibility that we are living in a simulation. It's not great to hear that, but it's a different kind of experience. So my question is not about consciousness per se, and that's a question I wanted to ask you for a long time. It's my privilege that I'm standing here and had the opportunity to ask you. So I grew up in a household which my father idolizes Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, so I grew up with those stories. And I was a staunch Hindu devotee myself for a long time, and then COVID happened, and I was in Delhi at that point of time, and we saw a lot of sufferings, right? And we started asking those questions. And then I saw one of your videos where you answered that if God exists, then why there is so much of suffering, and that answered most of it. But there's one question that I'm completely, how do you say, which completely absorbs me, and I need an answer for that. Like, I'm the same age where I think Vivekananda went to Ramakrishna and asked if God exists or not, and Ramakrishna gives him one answer, yes, it does, and I can show it to you. So my question to you is that, did you have any kind of experience with God in any forms or possibilities, or if you have, can you help me to have the same kind of experience?
Yes. That's a good question. It's a very direct question. First of all, let me just listen to what you said very carefully. It's a good thing that you pointed out, some people might have misunderstood, that you're ending with this idea of we might be living in a simulation, and that's discouraging. But you know, the Advaita Vedanta perspective is not discouraging at all. If you think of a Matrix movie, it's discouraging. You are under the grasp of some alien intelligence who is victimizing you. Or if it's just a dream, it's discouraging, then it's not reality. But Advaita Vedanta doesn't say that. It says that the simulation depends entirely on you. Look at the difference between the worldview, our present common sense worldview, and the Advaitic worldview. Right now we feel we are a tiny creature. Physically we are so tiny, so vulnerable, physically we are so tiny. In time we are so tiny. Our beginning and our end, our birth and death is less than a tiny flash in the existence of this world, or let alone this universe. So I'm a tiny, helpless, limited creature in this vast and probably uncaring universe. That's what common sense and modern materialist reductionist scientism is telling me. Advaita Vedanta is telling me just the opposite. It's telling me this vast universe is experienced in you. You are experiencing it. First and foremost, it's an appearance in consciousness. So, you are that consciousness. That's the central teaching of Advaita Vedanta. Tat Tvamasi. That thou art. You are that reality. You are the absolute reality of the universe. Ashtavakra sings, in me the infinite ocean of existence. The universe appears as a wave. Let it arise, let it subside. I am neither increased by it nor diminished by it. The entire universe. It's not like you are a tiny drop of water in an ocean. Rather, the ocean, you are the ocean in which the entire universe, this body, and all of that, it's all appearing in you from your perspective as consciousness itself. Okay, good, let there be light. All right, the second question was, I'll just give you, the actual question which he asked. Let me just answer that. I'll give you a very brief but very significant answer. This question about seeing God. I don't have the capacity of Sri Ramakrishna to touch you and you will realize God. But this is the beauty of Advaita Vedanta. This very experience. The problem is when we see God, first of all, if you say God is a matter of belief, that makes it too distant. Second, if you say God is a matter of experience, what experience? A special mystical experience, which Ramakrishna can give Vivekananda. That still makes it a little, it's hopeful, maybe I'll get it someday, but still makes it a little distant because I don't have that. What Advaita says goes deeper. It says, you have experience, isn't it? What do you mean experience? Seeing, are you seeing, are you hearing, are you smelling, tasting, touching? Are you thinking, enjoying, suffering? Yes, all of us are. Advaita Vedanta makes the extraordinary claim, and a claim of great hope, that if you follow Advaita Vedanta into the depths of this experience, you will see that you are God. The identity between Brahman and Jiva is established there. Not you as a person. Person is not God, that is madness. But what you think yourself as a person and what you think as the cosmos is one reality, one consciousness. And that is already there. I'll give you a definition of Brahman in Advaita Vedanta. Anubhava matra param Brahma. What is Brahman, the ultimate reality of the universe, existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda? What is it? Anubhava matra. Anubhava, experience. The moment you say experience, who does not have experience? We all have experience. All of us have any experience. But then it says Anubhava matram. Matram means the underlying reality of all experience, devoid of experiencer, experienced. There is a consciousness in which experiencer and experienced object are appearing and disappearing. That underlying consciousness which you are, that is Param Brahma. To make it even more direct, what is the experience of God? It is your experience of yourself. Only if you would understand what it is. How do I understand it? Advaita Vedanta. Here and now. And I mean every word of it. Take it seriously. Okay. Good question. Next. Somebody from this side?
Hello.
Oh.
In the interest of time, we request you to keep your questions short and precise, and please avoid any personal experience.
Okay. So, where do we go? Yeah, the lady here. Just tell us your name and ask the question.
My name is Amrita, and my question is regarding your talk on Secret of Om. Goes directly to who am I? I think you kind of answered the question. And also the seventh mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. And I think I'm really scared to talk about it. So I think the Atma Bodh and Atma Gyan both goes hand in hand, because if there is no Atma Bodh, then you can talk about anything. And in Secret of Om, you talked about like relating as Jagrut Avastha, like waking, U as dream world, and as the deep dream darkness. And then you talk about the silence after that. So when I meditate on that, that silence is actually not silence. That's like a sound of silence. Like when you close your ears, you hear like a toom sound. But then that silence is where from where the sound and the silence appear. So
Yeah.
can we say that is Atmabodh, that
Okay.
is Brahman,
Okay.
but then again, that is object. So
Yes.
is it self?
Very good. All right. Let me just, enough to be going on with it. And pretty deep stuff. So there are a lot of people who have followed Vedanta very carefully, have studied and listened to the talks and studied the texts.
If you can repeat the question.
Yes. So that's a big job. I have to repeat the question. Amrita is asking that in Mandukya Upanishad you had mentioned A-U-Ma. Om is composed of A-U-Ma. A is related to the waking experience. U is related to our dream experience. And the Ma, is related to our deep sleep experience. And he said the real self, the Atman, is the silence beyond the Om. You chant Om and then silence. That silence represents or indicates the Atman. Then she said that, but even when I try to meditate on that silence, there is a hum, a physical hum. And that's also an object. That hum cannot be the Atman. So doctors would say that you have, what is it called? Tinnitus. Tinnitus. Yeah. So let me answer the tail end of the question first. If you can calm your mind down to absolute quietness, you're sitting still, eyes are closed, mind is not engaged, senses are not engaged with the world, mind is not engaged with the senses, you're quiet, no thoughts. Even if there's this feeling of a hum, you can hear it sometimes in very silent auditoriums, or rooms in shrines. You're right, that's an object. An object to what? It can only be an object to you. But then what does that make you? The last object is being witnessed by me. I am not a body, not a thought, not a feeling. I am not an idea. I am not a word. I am not a kind of thinking. I am not even the last final subtle humming object. Drop that also. What am I? Don't look for an answer. And then notice, so you can only be that pure consciousness, objectless consciousness. Or in philosophical language, non-intentional awareness. So those who study philosophy, if you heard of intentionality of Husserl, the German phenomenologist. Non-intentional awareness. But even more important than that, many people miss it. They think that Sankhya, Advaita, Yoga, these philosophies, they talk about pure consciousness, where there is no thought, no world. It is true. But then they make a mistake thinking, so those are special cases. I have seen a paper written, pure consciousness events. Paper, actual neuroscience paper. Pure consciousness events. Complete misunderstanding. If it is an event, it has a beginning and an end. It is an objective component. That's not pure consciousness. So I am that which is aware of that hum. But then notice, that consciousness, it must be the same consciousness which experiences the blankness of deep sleep, the dreams in the dream state, and the waking state right now. And it experiences the mind and the body and the personality of Amrita, and it must be the same consciousness which calls itself Amrita. That same consciousness, which is entirely free of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, is the one in which waking, dreaming, and deep sleep appear and disappear. It's free of the problems of waking and dreaming. Deep sleep in itself has no problems. That consciousness you are. That's called Turiya. Her expression is, that didn't help much. No, you dwell on this. One needs to quietly think about it. Yes. Then next, who's there? Yes, please tell us your name and ask the question.
My name is Raghunath Kulkarni.
Yes.
In the entire lecture, you said that Advaita, this Vedanta, is based on Advaita. But in the case of Advaita, you said God and myself, God, myself. Why there are two? And you are already, everybody is questioning the God. Where is the God? Either you remove the God or you remove yourself. They are one money. As long as we are in the relative world, and we are bound to be in the relative world. So can it be possible to have an idea of non-dualism? And another thing.
No, let's just deal with one thing at a time. Because Kulkarniji has heavy questions. He asked about, you're talking about Advaita Vedanta, but you talked about two, myself and God. But you noticed one thing, I didn't mention just Advaita Vedanta. I said there is a whole range of Vedanta philosophies, but I am focusing on Advaita Vedanta. Now, why are there two? Why am I talking about two? Advaita means non-dual. But you cannot straight away go to the non-duality. As you said, in the relative world, can you go to the non-duality? You can, but not straight away. I am going to quote from Nagarjuna, who was a great Buddhist, one of the greatest Buddhist philosophers, who lived nearly 2000 years ago in Andhra, in India. In his Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he says, Samvritti manashritya paramartham nadhigamyate. It's actually an incredible text, Mula Madhyamaka Karika. I have met philosophers here in the United States, at Harvard University, who said that from our youth as philosophy grad students, they've been fascinated by that text. Simple Sanskrit, one of the most profound things. One of the profound things there is a famous two-stage theory of truth. Relative truth, ultimate truth. In Vedanta we call it Vyavaharika Satyam, Paramarthika Satyam. Relative truth, ultimate truth. But Nagarjuna, he was the one who got this idea first. He calls it Samvritti, relative truth, and Paramartha, same term, same Sanskrit term, Paramarthika. Then he says, without taking the help of relative truth, nobody can attain to the ultimate truth. So therefore, we need Vedanta, Buddhism, science, all of these are relative truths. So once we are in the realm of duality, we are in the realm of relative truth. But your question was, can one go from here to the absolute truth? Yes, one can. Why? Because the relative truth is always grounded in the absolute truth. One of Shankaracharya's comments, I don't know where it is, he says, Niradhara Brahma Namayam Mangi Kurma. We do not accept falsity without ground. That everything is false. Then what's the reality? No reality. That also is false. Ground like a bottomless well, you are dropping through falsity all the time. So some people, some Mahayana, I would say Tibetan Buddhist teachers, actually explain Tibetan Buddhism in this way. One Tibetan great teacher said, what's the problem in dropping through space without its own? The problem is only when you hit the ground. But there's no ground, so you can always drop endlessly through space. No. There is no conception of falsity without truth. You cannot. Then that would be something, you're talking about something else, not falsity then. So, our relative truth is grounded in the ultimate truth. The cinema is grounded it's on the cinema screen. There is a reality in which it is grounded. So, by investigation of our relative truth, Advaita Vedanta, Madhyamaka Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, these are ways, even people like completely atheistic and skeptical people, Sam Harris, and some of you may know. So he is a confirmed materialist, but he says in his book, Waking Up, he says, at least I completely disagree and disbelieve every religion. It is superstition. I have no truck with it. He says this. He says, but however, at least two systems have a core of truth. It is the Advaita Vedanta tradition of Hinduism and the Madhyamaka Buddhism, the Vajrayana, this Dzogchen tradition within Tibetan Buddhism. And he says, incredibly, both of them are pointing to the same thing. And he says, there is a core of truth which we cannot deny that it exists. I'll leave it at that.
In that case,
yes.
sorry. In that case, should I take it that whatever you have talked about Vedanta and other things is for PhD? I am in KG1, KG2. So
here we bring in. You are not in KG1, KG2. I know that very well. He is a translator of some of the Vedanta texts. You know, those of you don't know him, but he is a lifelong student of Vedanta. But he has raised an important point. Is it all? Somebody said, Swami, it's like a brain fryer. What you're listening to these texts, there's a text called Vichara Sagar. And, it's a brain fryer of a text. So is it not for me? Is it of any practical use? Here we will bring in Sri Ramakrishna. And this idea, and it's an ancient Indian idea, that all paths lead to the same truth. If you think this is too hyper-intellectual, fine. The conclusion in Vedanta is, I have a simple devotion to a very dualistic idea of God and simple devotion to God. Yes, I admit it, it's entirely based on faith, but I believe it. Will it work? Yes. That is Sri Ramakrishna saying, Jato mat tato pad. As many faiths, so many ways to enlightenment, so many ways to God. And then he says, it's not anything goes. Sri Ramakrishna immediately qualifies it by saying, but you must hold on to something seriously. You must practice somewhere seriously. All of them will work. All of them will work. They will take you, they are all about the same. And what's the proof? The proof is, over centuries and millennia, these are paths which have taken people to enlightenment. Every tradition has, every religion, and every tradition in every religion has produced men and women of great saintliness, great spirituality. That is the proof that I don't have to think that is PhD level stuff, I am in kindergarten. No. Every path will lead me to that goal. It's a good point that Kulkarni has raised. Somebody? The gentleman at the back there? Him, yeah, there. And then next to him.
My name is Aaron, and you might have kind of answered the question there, but I was going to ask, how would you compare the Hindu monastic struggle to almost like Buddhist or Catholic? You said almost they all lead to the same path, so you might have almost answered it, but I was curious about that.
Is your question, Aaron's question is about monasticism in these traditions,
or how would you compare Hindu monasticism to almost Catholic or Buddhism monasticism? Like,
I'll give you a general answer to that. His question is about Hindu monasticism, Buddhist monasticism, Catholic monasticism. Monasticism in Hinduism is actually very, very ancient. Many people think that the Buddhist monasticism was the first monastic order in India. Not at all. Much older than Buddhist monasticism is Jain monasticism. Remember, the Buddha himself became a monk when he saw a monk. And the four signs: sick person, old person, dead person, monk. So there were plenty of monks in Buddha's time, plenty of hermits. Yes, a kind of organization which Buddha did that was unique, but then there were Jain monks who were also pretty organized by that time. In Upanishads, you find monasticism. Yajnavalkya in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is one of the oldest Upanishads, so thousands of years ago, he renounces the world at the end of the Upanishad. And Hindu monasticism is based on the Upanishads, which predates Jain and Buddhist monasticism. Now, the basic idea is this. There are religions which are heavily monastic in nature. There are religions which are partially monastic in nature. And there are religions which are not at all monastic in nature, which are entirely householder-centered. So, Buddhism and Jainism are examples of religions which are heavily monastic. And by Buddhism, I mean the Theravada Buddhism of South Asia, Southeast Asia also, which is very monk-oriented. And also the Tibetan Buddhism, which is also very monastic-oriented. Of course, there are Mahayana traditions which are householder-oriented. Jainism is strongly monastic-oriented. Of course, every tradition has to have a householder tradition. Otherwise, where will the children come from? How will the religion? You can't have a religion of only monks. Then Hinduism and Christianity, especially Catholic Christianity, are both. They have, of course, they're mostly lay people, householders, with well-organized and ancient monastic traditions. So, for example, straight from the time of Jesus Christ, all throughout the history of the Catholic Church, there have been monks and nuns. From the Desert Fathers onwards, there have been monks. So Christ himself taught his apostles to be celibate, and they were monks actually. And then there are religions like, for example, in Judaism, in Islam, in Sikhism in India, there is no monastic tradition as such, or even if there are traditions of fakirs and hermits, they are much less in number. Only one point I want to make here. Monks and nuns are like super specialists. So if you are, for computers, you need computer engineers. But everybody doesn't have to be a computer engineer to use computers. Of course not. All of us use it. I use this phone without knowing what goes on inside. But you still need some people who know what goes on inside this. Similarly, there are super specialists in the realm of spirituality. And monks and nuns aspire to be that. That's it. It's religion, spirituality is not meant only for monks and nuns. That's the danger of monastic-oriented religions, I think. Because, for example, in Hinduism, I know, a common question would be, in India especially, so is God realization, enlightenment and all that meant for monks? So like spirituality becomes the special thing for monks and others are not spiritual. No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, we forget, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is not a monk. Arjuna is not a monk, and after the Bhagavad Gita was taught, neither of them became monks. They were householders. The rishis of the Upanishads, the Vedanta on which my philosophy is based, most of them were householders. I'll just leave it at that. I know it's not a direct answer to your question, but a general observation. Yes. How are we doing for time? We have time of 2. We have 6.
I want to start this off saying I'm grateful that I'm here in your presence, and I want to go down to Mahakali for that.
What's your name?
My name is Gaurav. I'm an international student from Nepal. I have written down the question since I thought about this before. You also mentioned this, with Kashmiri Saivism endangered and the Gaudiya Vaishnavism also watered down now, and with the growth of these new Advaitian ideologies, what do you think? How do you think they are actually affecting our understanding of the ancient text? And what do you think if they are adding anything positive to the revolution, or will cause more fissures going forward? Thank you.
All right. So his question is that you mentioned that with Kashmiri Shaivism endangered and Gaudiya Vaishnavism watered down. I didn't say that. But you said it, yeah. I mean, you said it. So Gaurav is asking, but he's asking a pertinent question. In this day and age, with the proliferation of neo-Advaita teachers and sects, all this proliferation, is it adding anything positive, or is this leading to more fissures and loss? I would say firmly, it is a positive movement, without detracting from what you said. What Vivekananda did when he came to the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, started the Vedanta societies, and started a movement because of which I am standing here and you are here today, spreading the ancient accumulated spiritual treasures of India across the world. Remember, in his train came Vivekananda. After that, many other Swamis from the Vedanta societies, from Ramakrishna Mission in India. Then we had Paramahamsa Yogananda, the Self-Realization Fellowship. Then the great teachers of Hatha Yoga, who came mostly, Krishnamacharya, Pattabi Joyce and others, who made this Hatha Yoga itself such a very popular thing. It's across the United States. There are more, I think, yoga studios in the United States than there were in India at one time. Now I think thanks to Ramdev Baba and all, it's just slightly reversed. But it's the enormous popularity of Hatha Yoga. Then you had Swami Satchidananda coming, and Srila Prabhupada, the huge movement, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It should not be underestimated. You see, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it is still limited to the eastern part of India for centuries and centuries. And actually, it's mostly in Bengal, both West Bengal and East Bengal, and some part of northeast India, Orissa. That's it. That's it for centuries. But the accumulated treasure of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that is what Srila Prabhupada bought, and the few years remaining in his life, he spread it across the world. You see what a huge and powerful movement he started, ISKCON. And so it's a vibrant movement. Then you have Maharshi Mahesh Yogi's Transcendental Meditation, another huge movement, and so on. And it's a continuing process. Along with that, Buddhism, huge, it's huge, starting with interest in Theravada Theravada Buddhism, then a wave of Zen Buddhism, D.T. Suzuki and others, in the Alan Watts in the Bay Area and so on. And then His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the entire Tibetan Buddhist movement, which is huge now, across the United States and across the Western world. So I look at it all as a movement started by Vivekananda. He said, the Vedanta, which has hitherto been confined to the hands of a few monks and pandits, scholars, which has been confined to caves and forests, I shall distribute it across the world. I shall bring Vedanta from the forest to the cities. This whole movement of bringing Vedanta from the forest to the cities, it was meant for everybody. If Krishna teaches Arjuna in the middle of a battlefield, in the worst possible places, it is something that is useful in practical life, not just for people sitting in ashrams. And that has happened. You see, we should see the alternative. It could have not happened. Like Nietzsche said, God is dead. It could have disappeared. The whole, people would have said, oh, these are ancient things good for museums. Nobody's interested. Could be. But it's not true. Last 100 years shows that it's not true. People are very interested in spiritual life and various traditions of spiritual life. So thousands of years of accumulated spiritual treasures in India. And when you democratize something, when you spread it across the world, it's great. A lot of people benefit from it. And the traditions survive. That's very important. Otherwise they'll disappear in the hands of a few people. The danger is it can get diluted. It can get diluted. And it can lose some of its pristine clarity which it had. That is something that we have to struggle with. And we have to keep it alive. I always feel a democratized knowledge system is safer and better than something remaining in the hands of a few elites. Good question, though. Should we come across? Or is someone in the middle of the gentleman there?
We have time for 2 questions.
2 more questions. The gentleman there, and yes, and then the lady here. Will they take these 2 questions?
I'll make mine quick. My name is Joe, and my question is, how do we use technology and scientific advancements for our liberation and not for our distraction and destruction?
Right. How do we use technology for liberation, not for distraction and destruction? It is sort of a little bit neutral, and this is an old answer. Technology depends on how you use it, and so you can use it for good or for bad. This is the old answer. I don't agree with it, but I'm telling you what the answer is. So you can use it for spirituality, and it is being used. I think one of the reasons a lot of people know what I'm saying about Vedanta is technology across the world. I remember walking in Central Park in New York, in Manhattan, in an evening walk, suddenly this person comes up to me and says, hey, aren't you the guy with those really long talks on YouTube? And I said, guilty as charged. Almost every other day, I meet somebody who has watched those talks. So it's wide range of knowledge systems is now available. And that's the beauty of technology. But not just in spirituality, even on campus, now what was earlier available as students from India, I know, only some very few limited good libraries would give us knowledge about particular subjects. Which is why these enormous libraries in these magnificent institutes in the United States, the American university system, the American library system, these are temples of knowledge. But thanks to, in part, to the new technology, information technology, these libraries have diminished in importance, and the knowledge therein has been democratized. And even now in a small town or even a village in India, you can have access to the kind of research and latest knowledge or just general reference which we growing up in pre-internet India couldn't have imagined. Even the best of libraries available to us at that time couldn't have given us that knowledge. So that's a huge step forward. However, has it revolutionized academics? Have people become, are there Einsteins in every classroom? No. we realize suddenly how difficult it is to drink from a hose pipe. There's a huge amount of water coming, but that doesn't mean you can drink it easily. You can't. You can actually be knocked out by the force of that water. And something like that is happening. There's a lot of people who say, so much is available now on YouTube. What should I follow? I follow something every other day. And that's not going to work at all. Especially in spiritual life, you need to hold on and dig down rather than spread yourself all over. Why I said the old idea of technology being neutral, you can use it for good or bad, that's a cliche. It doesn't always hold good. Especially this modern technology, it is leading to a crisis in concentration, a crisis in focus. And this is a real crisis. I'm not being alarmist. I meet school teachers who are saying this last generation of kids is the most distracted generation they have ever seen. And that's entirely due to the digital technology. So this ability not to hold on to one line of thought, but to quickly jump from one thing to another. There was a book long ago on the effect of computers on the minds of school children. And the book, the title says it all, The Flickering Mind. You know, the old screens used to flicker, the TV screens, so the flickering mind. So that is one danger we have to be careful about in using this modern technology. Somebody, an engineer from Google who was like a whistleblower, he said that this modern technology is not neutral. You can't say that you can use it for good or bad, doesn't matter. No. In that case, what about the gun cabinets in your house, the liquor cabinets in your house? Why do you keep it locked if it's neutral? You can say you can use it for good or bad. No, there's a danger associated with it. That's why you keep it locked, only in the hands of responsible people. You can't let kids near it. And yet, this technology is pervasive. You can't say you won't let kids near it. It pervades their lives. So I don't know where this is going, but this is something we are increasingly aware of, and we're seeing the effects of it now in classrooms, in boardrooms, in company, in universities. At Harvard University, I saw that. I would watch the students in action. Very brilliant young men and women. But I saw a phenomenon, I didn't know there was a name for it. There's a name for it now. It's called intermittent attention. Intermittent attention. So they're paying attention, listening to what the professor says, then looking at the screen a little bit, then going back and listening to what the professor says. Then what the professor said, I will look it up on the screen, get more information, and from there I will go to something else, and from that something else to my social media feed. And then I'll come back again to the professor. That's what's happening in classrooms and boardrooms. And unfortunately, this has a negative effect in spiritual life. Spiritual life is greatly dependent on focus, on concentration. It's an inward thing, on the sacrosanct nature of our awareness. If I continuously disturb it, like a flame in a wind, it's difficult to go deep enough. Simone Weil, who was this young French philosopher, her brother is very well known as a mathematician, André Weil. Simone Weil is this book, Waiting for God. And there's some essays which are beautiful. I think every student should read them. She says, studies are important. School studies are important. Why? Why? Studies are important because they train the mind in concentration, which is essential for spiritual life. What a beautiful idea. I got goosebumps reading it. School studies, your college, your university, your school is a training place for spiritual life. Just because they train you in focus. Okay, leave it at that. Last question. This last question here. Tell us your name and ask the question.
My name is Seema. Pranam Swamiji, and thank you for coming to our North Carolina Vedanta Society. My question is, can we be considered minuscule, very, very minuscule co-creators with God, or just be His instruments or conduits for serving Him and His constituents?
Okay, Seema is asking, can we be considered co-creators, and minuscule co-creators of this universe with God, or just do His will? We have no part in what is going on. From an Advaitic perspective, neither. The two perspectives you have put forth. One is a dualistic Dvaita perspective. There's a school of Vedanta which says this, that the Lord, God is the master, you are the servant. The only independent, so Dvaita Vedanta, Madhva Vedanta, central idea there is, God is the only reality which is Swatantra, entirely free. And every other being, sentient being, is Paratantra, dependent on God. So you are not co-creator of the universe along with God. No. God alone is the completely independent agent in this universe. And we are entirely dependent on God. Our so-called free will also is an appearance. That's the dualistic, theistic approach in Dvaita Vedanta, Madhva Vedanta. The second theory, actually the first theory you mentioned, was Vishishta Dvaita, which says we are sentient beings and we constitute the body of God. We are not separate from God. We are tiny, but we are part of God. So that is Vishishta Dvaita, Shesha Sheshi or Amsha Amshi, part and whole relationship. And there we are the co-creator. How we are the co-creator? What we do in life, the karma that we are setting into motion, that will determine our future experiences. As Vivekananda put it, what we are today is the result of all that we have done in the past. And what we do now will create what we will be in the future. But what we will be in the future will be created by God. So God will create this universe and life and give us life experiences in the future, in this life, next life, many lives hence, depending on our present karma. So God's creation of the universe is not entirely random, is not entirely arbitrary. It is designed to give us the best possible experiences so that we can become enlightened. Not the happiest experiences, but the best educative experiences which will lead us to enlightenment. The goal is enlightenment. That is Vishishta Dvaita. So Shesha, Amsha, Amshi, part, whole relationship. But Advaita Vedanta would say, if your question is, are we minuscule components, co-creators of the universe along with God? Advaita would say no. Are we entirely dependent on God to do His will? Advaita would say no. Because you and God are identical. Yes. So knowing your nature as pure consciousness. But in this relative world, there is a very big difference between you and God. In ultimate truth, you and God are the same. Hanuman, we'll end with the words of Hanuman. I like that. It's a beautiful statement. Ramachandra asks Hanuman, what do you think of me? Your idea about me. Evaluation. And Hanuman's answer is beautiful. So profound. He says, Deha buddhya dasoham. When I think of myself as Hanuman, this person, with this body, this person, I am the servant, you, my Lord, Rama, you are my master. Lord is my master, I am the servant. Jiva buddhya tvadanshaka. As a sentient being, who in this body is Hanuman, in past life was something else. If at all we go to any other life, I'll be something else. But I'm a conscious being. You are this ocean of consciousness, I am your part. Tvad anshaka. I am a part of you. You are the whole, I am your part. Vishishta Dvaita. And then third he says, Atma buddhyatu tvamevaham iti me nishchitamati. But as the Atman, as consciousness, as awareness, not body, not mind, as awareness, you and I are one. Tvamevaham, you and I are one only. Which is correct? This third one is Advaita, non-duality. Which is correct? He says, iti me nishchitamati. This is my conviction. All three are correct. And the beauty of this is, I know Aham Brahmasmi. But as Sarvapriyananda, the same Aham Brahmasmi, with this body and mind is Sarvapriyananda. This is the servant of the Lord, Bhakta or the devotee of the Lord. That is the best possible life for this Sarvapriyananda, for this individual manifestation. So this is a beautiful theme to end on. Thank you for that question, Seemaji. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Swamiji. I request our President, Chandramouli Avasti, to deliver a vote of thanks.
It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks today. On behalf of Ramakrishna Vedanta Society of North Carolina and Hindu YUVA at NC State, I thank Swami Sarvapriyananda ji for giving such an insightful talk. We learned a lot about Vedanta, its message and relevance in the current world. Thank you, Swamiji. I thank the Vedanta Society for bringing Swamiji to our campus. I hope collaboration between Hindu YUVA and the Vedanta Society continues in the future and we get to arrange more events like this. I thank all the volunteers from both the organizations for planning well in advance and making sure the event ran smoothly. Thank you for all your hard work. And finally, I thank the audience for coming in huge numbers and making the event a success. For more updates, follow Vedanta Society at www.vedantanc.org and Hindu YUVA at Instagram handle Hindu YUVA NCSU. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Couple of announcements before we disperse. In the foyer outside, we have Darshana exhibits. Darshana is an exhibition describing the culture and traditions of Hinduism. And in the foyer outside, we have books on Vedanta and spirituality. You are welcome to take them. And on your way out, we have volunteers distributing prasadam. I request all of you to collect them. Thank you. Namaste.
There is water also on your way out. Take a bottle of water and prasad. And one more reminder, tomorrow we have another talk from Swamiji at Hindu Society of North Carolina, again from 4 to 6 p.m. Seating will again start at 3:30 p.m. Please do come for that one also. The topic of that talk will be transformative spiritual practices based on Bhagavad Gita. So at the HSNC temple, correct. It's going to be in the main auditorium of HSNC. Close it, and